Hello, I'm Wes Lee. I'm an assistant state specialist with Oklahoma State University's Cooperative Extension Program. I work out of the Biosystems and Ag Engineering Department here at Stillwater, but officially I am housed at Norman at OU at the National Weather Center because I work for the Oklahoma Mesonet program. There I'm the agriculture coordinator for that program. I've been asked to speak with you today about the weather conditions for 2022, the spring of 22, compared to the long-term average. We'll start with rainfall. If we look at rainfall, our weather pattern this past winter has been dominated by something called the La Nina weather pattern. That typically means warmer than normal and drier than normal for most of Oklahoma. And that certainly was the case in the early part of the winter, where we had exceptionally warm temperatures and very dry rainfall pattern. Now, when we flipped over into 2022, we continued that dry weather pattern, but the temperatures seemed to be a little bit cooler than normal. For example, January, February, and March all came in at somewhere between 2 and 4 degrees below normal for the month. Rainfall patterns for January, February, and March were all below normal, 1 to 2 inches per month below normal for most of our mesonet locations across the state. The only part of the state that received normal rainfall for the winter of 2022 was a small area on I-40 to the east around Sallisaw to Fort Smith, Arkansas. The rest of the state was somewhere running a deficit. Of course, that deficit was much worse in the western half of the state than the eastern half of the state. Those cooler than normal temperatures that we've received since the first of the year have kept our plants a little bit behind normal for this time of year. Things like this beautiful redbud behind me look gorgeous today, but a week or so ago they were just looked like twigs or dormant plants. From about Oklahoma City south, the native plants like the oak trees, the post oaks and the blackjacks are starting to leaf out in the last couple of days. But here in Stillwater, those native plants still lack leaves on them, but they should start coming around in the next few days with these warmer temperatures that we start to have. Things that are planted in the soil because of those cooler than normal soil temperatures, again, that are running 3 or 4 degrees below normal and have been since around the first of the year, that's delayed emergence of seeds from germinating. Emergence of things like asparagus seems to be late. Seeds that we planted in the garden, even cool season seeds like lettuce and spinach, has had a hard time germinating due to those cooler than normal soil temperatures. A positive thing from those cooler temperatures are some of our weeds, like crabgrass has been a little bit later germinating in the year, so maybe give you a little more time to control some of those weedy plant populations out there. What are we in store for this year? Well, we've not had that long of a period of time without those freezing temperatures. So as we have already talked about, our plants are a little bit behind schedule this year compared to normal. Therefore, if we get that freeze somewhere around April 20th or Easter, as a lot of people say, we're not going to see the amount of damage that we saw the previous year. Now, if you look at the Mesonet data, looking at the long-term average last freeze for the state, that would mean 50% of the time we would be done with freezes for the most part of the state somewhere around the first week of April, maybe up to April 10th. But that leaves years when we have those late freezes. And in fact, we have a table that shows when the last 90% of the freezes should be done with, and that still could be a little bit later in the year than this year. And then I would look at the week-long forecast, the best thing we have to look at and see are we have any more of those freezing conditions in the forecast before I laid those sensitive plants like peppers and tomatoes in the ground for this year. The effect of that rainfall on soil moisture is very important on our plants, our crops. Soil moisture has been pretty good in the eastern half of the state, running fairly close to normal for this time of year. But if you look at western Oklahoma, where we've had that deficit of rainfall for a long period of time, Our drought continues in that part of the state, and we have some serious deficits in our soil moisture levels. We are several inches behind where we ought to be this time of year. The eastern half of the state right now is pretty good, even with the lack of rainfall that some locations have received, mainly because being winter months, the evapotranspiration rates are fairly low, and it just doesn't take as much moisture to drive the plants in the cool months as it does in the months when we start getting hot and warm. Wind is always something that we have to deal with in the spring months of the year. In fact, late March through April tend to be the windiest times of the year on there, and that certainly has been the case so far for this year to date. We've had some excessively windy days with some wind speeds above what are considered severe storm levels, which is 58 miles an hour or higher in large parts of the state this spring. Our sustained winds, even on a day like today, are running 20 or 25 miles per hour, which is high enough to cause problems with the plants. It dries out the moisture that we have in the soil, it dries the leaves out, so it requires a little more irrigation or a little more rainfall to keep those plants growing properly. Winds tend to start dying down when we get into May and June, and so hopefully things will continue as normal as they're supposed to. If we look at the long-term average, rainfall tends to go up in May and June, but winds tend to come down, and that should be a benefit for our plants going forward. This has been a general summary of the weather conditions that we have received to date in Oklahoma, but know that Oklahoma weather can change dramatically in just a short period of time. Those of you that have lived here a long time know how the weather can change frequently in Oklahoma. So revert to our mesonet.org website or our Mesonet app at both the Google Play and the Apple Store to be able to monitor the weather conditions as it happens in the state of Oklahoma. I'm Wes Lee, and thank you for this opportunity to visit with you today.
We hope you enjoyed this video as part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on the OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.